Well, Cliff and I are delighted to be here tonight. It's always wonderful to come back to New Orleans, where, as many of you know, I got my doctorate from Tulane, and my younger daughter was born right here. So any excuse to come here is a good one. But this year, you are going to play such an important role in helping get America back on the right track that we're particularly pleased to be with you. And I just want you to know that when Dr. Bill Cassidy replaces Mary Landrieu, you will have helped America take a big step in the right direction. Now, the fact is that Senator Landrieu is among the most reliable Barack Obama supporters in the U.S. Senate. And she can run all the commercials she wants, but they cannot cover up the basic fact that it's very hard to get to her left unless you actually move to San Francisco. And your race this fall is going to be very, very important. The real choice for America in 2014 and 2016 is between breakdown and breaking out. We have a chance to once again be the country that leads the world. But to do that, we've got to get away from the liberals who are breaking us down on every front. I mean, when you look at the disaster of the Veterans Administration, the disaster of the Internal Revenue Service, the disaster of the Obamacare website, you just go through item after item. This may be not only the most liberal president in American history, he may be the most incompetent president for at least the last 150 years. Now, Cliff and I look forward to seeing some of you later on because we both have books that are very different. Mine, Breakout, is about policy ideas. Hers are central, I think, to the survival of American culture. She's developed a character called Ellis the Elephant, who teaches 4 to 8-year-olds about American history. And it's a sad commentary on what's happened to this country in my lifetime, that we as parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles have to ensure that our children and grandchildren, our nieces and nephews, learn about American history, because we have no reason to believe that the liberal education establishment will teach them the real facts. And so we have a job to do. And I'm very proud of Callista for diving into that and continuing to create a series of books that teach young people about this most extraordinary nation. But Breakout's also a very important concept, and it's important because I think it helps you understand where we are and what's possible. All across America, there are pioneers of the future. There are people who are inventing better products. There are people inventing better medical procedures. There are people who are inventing new ways of doing things. There are literally hundreds of thousands of Americans who get up every morning and develop a better future for all of us. And they are colliding with prison guards of the past. Very often, for example, in education, there are 1,000 new ideas, and then there's the teachers' union. In medicine, there are hundreds of new breakthroughs, and then there's the Food and Drug Administration. You just go through place after place like this. And so the great struggle is between the prison guards of the past, who are almost all on the left, not always, but almost all, and the pioneers of the future, developing a much better future. Think about it this way. If we'd had the current structure of government in 1840, the Stagecoach Association would have hired a lobbyist to pass a bill to make it illegal for trains to go faster than a horse. Now, that's the kind of mess we're in. And that's, frankly, the kind of mess that the Mary Landrieu's of the world live off of, because they use their power to take care of their lobbyists to protect the past, and in the process, they stifle the future. And you can just look at the Keystone Pipeline as an example. Now, I'm just going to give you 2 quick examples of how big the breakthrough is and contrast it with the government we have right now. How many of you, and I can't quite see very well now, if I do this I can. How many of you have ever gotten money out of an ATM outside the U.S.? Raise your hand if you've ever gotten money outside the U.S. Okay, so this is not a theory, right? You can walk up, Clifton and I were just in Iceland, and you can walk up to an anonymous machine. You put in a plastic card. The machine lights up and offers you 6 or 8 languages. You pick one of the ones you're good at. Normally English. You punch in a 4-number code. It reaches out thousands of miles across international borders. It finds your bank account, verifies who you are, validates you have money, gives you the local currency. You actually don't know what it costs because you don't know the exchange rate on the machine, but you think it is better than your hotel. And the whole process takes less than 11 seconds. It takes 183 days to move the record of a soldier from the Defense Department to the Veterans Administration. Now, this is when I talk about pioneers of the future versus prison guards of the past. This is the scale of the breakout we can offer America. To go from 183 days of bureaucracy to 11 seconds of modern technology. And that's part of what the Republican Party has to become. The party that offers a dramatically better future. And by the way, we've gotten money out of ATMs all over the world. And to the best of my knowledge, we have never had a major mistake. By contrast, the Internal Revenue Service last year, operating off of a paper-based bureaucracy that was invented around the time the manual typewriter was invented. Literally true, about 1880. They sent out $4 billion in refunds to people who should not have gotten them. My personal favorite is a building in Shanghai which got 353 checks from the Internal Revenue Service. Now, if a bureaucracy sends 1 check to the wrong place, that's a mistake. And people make mistakes. If it sends 2 checks, it's an embarrassment. If it sends 3 checks, it begins to be an outrage. But how do you defend a bureaucracy which could send 353 checks to 1 building in Shanghai and not notice it? And this is where we are. And by the way, this is a bipartisan problem. This is not just firing the head of the IRS or anything like that. These are old, obsolete systems run by models that no longer work while we're surrounded by the future. Example, again, I just want to see, how many of you have a smartphone? I know a lot of you do because you kept walking up and taking pictures. Now, I want you to think about this. How many of you have GPS on your smartphone? Raise your hand. How many of you no longer carry a map in your car? I mean, think about how big a change this is. Now, why does that matter? Well, here's why, and you can take this back home, talk to your state legislator, your city council, your county commission, your school board. The #1 instrument for fundamentally changing how we do public policy in America in the next 20 years is your smartphone. On the smartphone, you can go to the Khan Academy, which for free has 10 million visitors a month learning math and science, for free. You can go to Duolingo, where for free there are 7 different languages you can learn, for free. There are now 93,000 health applications available for smartphones. Dr. Burgess, who's a congressman from Dallas, has an EKG on his smartphone. He also has something for blood pressure, something for oxygen content. He has 8 different devices in his smartphone. In fact, there are now so many health applications for your smartphone that the Food and Drug Administration wants to regulate them. And this will be an example of a real fight between breakdown and breakout. And I'll tell you, you want to appeal to people under 30 years of age, you go to them and say that Barack Obama's FDA wants to regulate what's on their smartphone. And they'll think he's crazy. And so these are the kind of opportunities we have to have enormous breakouts that are going to make a huge difference. Now, I want to apply it to 2 places. The first is the Veterans Administration. And I called for Shinseki to resign. I'm glad that Shinseki resigned. I think that it was an embarrassment that we're now up to, and if you go to Gingrich Productions, where, by the way, we do 2 free newsletters a week and a free podcast every week. If you just go to gingrichproductions.com, you can sign up. And we tried to show how big the problem was, so we created an interactive map of the United States that currently has 37 different Veterans Administration sites that have scandals. And you can click on each site and it takes you to the articles that describe that particular site. 37. Now, this is not a small problem. This is not a handful of bad apples. This is a bureaucratic system which is decaying, which cannot deliver. As one veteran said to me earlier today, you risk your life overseas and then you come home and you risk your life at the Veterans Administration. There's something wrong with that model. But there are two lessons we need to take from what's happening at the Veterans Administration. The first is to say to your senators and your congressmen, this is about a systems collapse. It is not about Shinseki. Scapegoating 1, 2, 3, 4 people is totally irrelevant. What we want to do is rethink from the ground up in the age of the smartphone, what is it we should be doing for our veterans? What services should they get? And why can't it be as accurate and as fast and as real time as anything else you can imagine? And that should be the standard we demand. And we should fix the system and fix the system and fix the system until it can meet the speed and the accuracy and the convenience of the modern world. And that would be a very different veterans. I think it might not be a Veterans Administration bureaucracy. It might be a veterans service system that is really profoundly different as your smartphone is from a pen and a quill and parchment paper in the 1870s. And so we need to be the party that says we have the courage to let's look at what is the best we can do for our veterans. And if that means you got to cut across the bureaucracies, and I guarantee you there are going to be some Republicans who become prison guards of the past the minute it is their VA hospital or their VA center or their local goodie or their little favoritism. I mean, this stuff goes very deep in both parties. But we owe it to our veterans and their families to do what it takes to get this done. We cannot ask them to have courage on the battlefield if we lack the courage at home to do what is necessary to clean up the system and make it the best possible 21st century system. Let me give you just one other example of systems thinking, and I'm so grateful that all of you are here, that you're being good citizens, that you're active, that you're trying to learn, you're trying to do, and you're part of this great process by which America continues to govern itself. But the other systems place, and this is going to turn very different than the current news media thinks it is. The other systems place is the State Department. Now, former Secretary, former Senator, former First Lady Clinton, who will presently be a former failed presidential candidate again, she's written a chapter on Benghazi, which I think, by the way, is not the central issue. I do not believe that she has written a chapter on Boko Haram. And one of my goals is to convince the Benghazi committee that it needs to look beyond the handful of days in one city. And it needs to ask the question, what is there about the State Department culture that has led it to consistently, for well over a decade, refuse to admit the existence of radical Islamists and refuse to put the dots together across the whole world? And let me say, this is not just about Hillary Clinton. I first gave a speech at the American Enterprise Institute in 2002 saying that the State Department had to be profoundly overhauled, and I had President Bush and, at that time, several other key leaders, including the then Secretary of State, who were very unhappy. But the fact is, under the Bush administration, under the Clinton administration, under the Obama administration, the United States State Department has consistently refused to be honest about the existence of an international Islamic extremist organization, and their arguments are absurd. And as much as we need to clean up the Veterans Administration, we need to clean up the culture of the Foreign Service and the culture of the State Department. And if you look at the entire problem in Nigeria, which is the most populous country in Africa, in a very important country, in a country where the State Department under Hillary Clinton refused to admit that Boko Haram was a terrorist group. They said they were a local group. Now, just, again, maybe because I'm a historian, I get frustrated because I used to have students that I actually wanted to learn history, and I thought that secretaries of state and senators and others ought to be at least as good as the students used to be. Boko Haram's first base camp in northern Nigeria was called Afghanistan. I did not make this up. Now, if you were faced with a group that said their role model was the Taliban, and that they were naming their base camp Afghanistan because of their great belief in the Taliban, would you say, aha, this is a local group? And then if you learned that they sent people to Afghanistan, to Saudi Arabia, to Yemen to get trained, would you say, isn't this just like a Rotary exchange program? I mean, who are we to judge if you get together to learn how to do better bombs or how to kidnap more girls? I mean, do we want to be judgmental? Of course not. We're the American State Department. We're too blind and dumb to be judgmental. So, and I really, I need your help with this because it hasn't penetrated yet, because candidly, the news media is as frightened of being honest about radical Islamists as the State Department. And so we need to break through the political correctness, and I need your help because the Benghazi committee shouldn't just get sucked into a day-by-day chronology of one event. They should start and work backwards. Why did they not recognize it was a terrorist operation in Benghazi? Well, because they don't recognize it's a terrorist operation anywhere. What is there at the very core of the State Department that makes it impossible to come to grips with the great threat to America and the great threat to our civilization? Why is it that groups who go out and burn churches regularly, particularly on Christmas Day, which is what Boko Haram was doing, that we might have noticed that that was a religious event? But of course, it couldn't be a religious event because if it was a religious event, they'd be an extremist group, and they can't be an extremist group because they're people we really would like to talk with because, you know, if we talk to them, maybe they wouldn't burn as many churches. I mean, there's a passion in the State Department and there's a passion in the Obama administration to find moderate extremists. If only we could find, I'm not making this up, the guy who's the current head of the CIA when he was the Obama terrorism advisor in the White House said, we are looking for moderate elements of Hezbollah. Now, this is like saying in the old days of the Cold War, we really want to find the moderates at the KGB, and we did, by the way. Their name was Putin. And if you ever want to see just one segment of why Hillary Clinton in the end will not become president, look at the segment you can find on YouTube where they had a reset button with the Russians. I'm going to close on this because it is so unimaginably foolish. And she looks so silly. I mean, not since Secretary Albright danced with Kim Jong-il in Korea have we seen a scene like this. Apparently, the best we can figure out, that morning they got up and said, let's do something really cool at our first meeting with the Russian foreign minister to show how much more clever we are than the Bush administration. And they literally went to their hotel swimming pool area and they got a red button off the jacuzzi. They then said, we're going to really be clever. Let's get our translator to write on the button, reset. And if you watch this scene, I mean, you cannot imagine a serious adult representing the most powerful country in the world being this stupid. She's kind of giggling, and she hands the foreign minister this reset button. And she says to him, did we get the Russian right? And he said, actually not. You wrote down the word for overcharge. And she then giggles and says, well, we're certainly not going to let you do that, and then hugs him. This is, by the way, the same foreign minister who recently has been chatting with John Kerry about how much of Ukraine they need so they'll be happy. You know, I mean, I'll just close with this thought. You have a left dedicated to being prison guards of the past in education, in health care, across virtually every aspect of the government, dedicated to propping up failed systems, systems that only work to the advantage of their allies and do not work to the advantage of the country. And you have a left which has penetrated deeply in the State Department, which cannot come to grips with reality. And that's why this fall really matters. You helping Bill Cassidy win right here really, really matters. Thank you, good luck, and God bless you.